Welcome back to the panel discussion, Innovation in Government, Cyber Leaders and CDM, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guests today are Kevin Cox, CDM Program Manager at the Department of Homeland Security, Willie Crenshaw, CDM Program Executive at NASA, Ben Liberty, CDM Program Manager in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Interior, Greg Amore, Director of Civilian Agencies and Mid-Atlantic at Forescout Technologies, Dennis Riley, Vice President of Federal at Gigamon, and Tom Welsh, Director of Systems Engineering at FireEye Public Sector. I'm your moderator, JJ Green. Let me go back to you, Dennis, to start this segment off. We've heard a lot about operationalization. I want to figure out how you get the full value out of the technology and practices that you're using.
So we are working, as I mentioned, to ensure the foundation is solid across all of the agencies. And to Ben's point, part of that is to get full mission operationalization out of the tools, to ensure that the agencies can incorporate the value of the tools into their day-to-day operations, into their security operations, and really be able to step up in terms of their overall awareness and be able to use the information to benefit the agency. So in addition to the operationalization effort, we also want to make sure that the agencies are getting full value from the data that they are pulling up from the different sensors. So as Ben had also mentioned, with the amount of data coming up to the dashboard ecosystem, there's been some efforts we've had to take to ensure that the volume is processed properly, that the dashboard environment is scaling up properly for the agency. And a big effort underway now is we have our new dashboard contract in competition. We expect an award of that new dashboard contract in the May timeframe. And what that will do is really expand out that concept of the dashboard ecosystem, getting the agencies more access to their data rather than just feeding the data directly into a dashboard. It opens up the data environment so that they can incorporate that data into their security operations functions and be able to bring in business intelligence, be able to bring in different analytics visualization to really expand out the value of the tools. And so that's a big undertaking. The other thing I want to mention relates to the original goal. One of the original goals of the program was to help transform the compliance efforts throughout the federal government, to help automate as much as possible the control assessments throughout the agencies. So that will continue on, but what we really want to do, and as mentioned by the panel, is work to help the agencies not only keep up with the threat and keep up with technological evolution, but to get in front of both of those things so that they have a stronger cyber defense posture or footing, that they are able to bring innovation in as it becomes available, and they have the awareness of what's happening from the adversarial standpoint so they can get the proper protections in place, implement the proper responses to keep their data and, at the end of the day, the taxpayer data secure and the citizenry data secure throughout the federal government.
You know, Willie, we've heard for a long time that space is the final frontier. But we also know that space right now is front and center because there's another race going on to get there and to own it, if you will. And I'm very interested in hearing your view on your priorities when it comes to making sure that, okay, you're able to take all of the opportunities that having a great, robust CDM program gives you to get your mission done, and integrating it, spreading it out across all of your enterprise and all of your people, and you know, and looking at what Kevin was talking about, compliance is an issue, automation and all of that. You're familiar with those things, but you recognize that there's also a great deal of interest in getting this done quickly. Do you find yourself in a situation where you have to choose sometime? Do we do this quickly or do we do this right?
Well, the thing for NASA, the benefit is that NASA is an agency when it comes to deploying the CDM phase 1 and 2 tools that I had to put a plug in for NASA, that we are the first agency to actually deploy the CDM tools across our entire enterprise. So because of that, because of the reason of the mission, our thing is the mission. We need to enable the mission. But there are some unique things about NASA. I mean, when you talk about, we actually put things up in space, we actually have to launch. So we have launch schedules, we have all those types of things that we have to be aware of. And so when we talk about bringing something into that environment, it has to be tested, but it also has to go be implemented from a perspective of mission control. Mission control is going to launch, or they have something going on, or we have a spacewalk. We have to be aware of that from our perspective and honor that schedule and work with the centers. The one good thing that CDM, the way we implemented it, is that we teamed with DHS Integrator and the NASA team at NASA. And we've done a great job, and I have to give kudos to those engineers at NASA for working with us to ensure that we were on time, on schedule, and that we met their requirements as well as the DHS requirements. So we look at, there's a set of requirements for NASA and a set of requirements for the federal government that DHS is also implementing, and we put them together. And we communicate back to DHS, this is when we can do this and this is how we do that, so that we're not disrupting any kind of capabilities or any kind of schedule that's going on with NASA.
Yeah. Ben Liberty, when you meet with your team and you are doing, for lack of a better thought theme, your beginning of the week meeting or the most important meeting of a time frame, what is the very first thing, problem-wise, that usually comes up that you have to deal with? And is this a recurrent theme, or is it always something different when it comes to CDM? Because I can imagine, and this is just imagination only from a person who's not even a novice at understanding what it is you do, but when you look at where you have to go from day to day, even hour to hour with this process, what's the biggest concern that you have to deal with in talking your team through where we're going next with this?
Yeah, so one of the things that we focus on, and CDM is really no different than a lot of large federal programs when it comes to people, process, and technology. The technology, more often than not, is the easy part. It's really the people and the process, I think, that they can be challenging. So the approach DOI has taken, we're no different than any large department or agency. We have 14 sub-agencies that all have their own unique missions to what Willie just mentioned. Everybody has their own unique mission, but when it comes to IT, we're in 2019, IT is always going to support the mission in some fashion. So there's a lot of consistency that we can apply, but getting back to the people and the challenges of the people, the way that we're managing and deploying CDM is we're taking an enterprise-based approach, so that if there is a particular issue with a tool, for instance, we can do a lift and shift, and all that work that we did on the people side, the governance work, for instance, doesn't need to be redone. We can, because with capabilities, they're more requirements driven. So that's why we're kind of taking an enterprise approach for how we're managing CDM to kind of address some of those people and process problems.
JJ, I wanted to add something
Certainly.
to what Ben was saying. One of the most important parts of the CDM program is not just the tools and the capabilities and enabling them and putting them in. It's also looking at all of the things that we've been talking about for years in cyber and taking the opportunity to educate, the engineers as well as just the general population within the agency as to what the cyber threats are. Why are we doing this? So this has given us an opportunity to go out and actually kind of be an advocate for cybersecurity, to say, this is why we're doing this. This is why we're trying to protect the data. Here are the threats. Here are some other things that we need to do, and it's just not focused on.
So you make me think of a quick follow-up question. Are you doing that because you're just being proactive, or are you doing that because you need to remind people? People show signs that you need to remind them.
It's both. We need to continuously, if I'm just, putting in something, if I'm a programmer or a developer or I'm working on the next robot, I'm not always going to be focused on the cyber attack. I may not even know what's out there.
You may not even know how important that project is.
Right. So it's up to us as the cybersecurity professionals to know what you're doing, what the engineers are doing, and then say, this is how we can help you do what you're trying to do securely.
It's very interesting. So, Greg, I wanted to ask you regarding your attack surface. How have CDM tools helped your federal clients or others secure or identify the risks to their attack services, or their attack surfaces? How have these tools, for lack of a better word, made their lives easier?
Sure. So, old adage, if you can't see it, you can't protect it. So that right off the bat has given a lot of agencies the ability to protect those devices that they didn't before know about. We've had lots of examples of both on the commercial and on the government side, actually worldwide, where we've seen threats come in on devices that were unknown to that particular group, that particular agency, commercial customer, whatever it might be. Equifax jumps to mind with their Struts servers. So I think first and foremost that has been probably the best value and that we've seen out of CDM is that foundational layer that Kevin talked about and that visibility to those devices. If you can't know about it, then how are you going to protect it from those adversaries? So that's number one. Number two is just the ability to do this in real time. So our adversaries are moving faster and faster. So there's a part of it that's automation, which is, okay, a device comes on my network, I know about that device, and should it be on my network? Maybe, maybe not. If we don't know, if it's not a managed asset, for example, we can quarantine it or do something like that. I think those are the key things the program has brought to agencies. And
when you sit down and have conversations with your government counterparts and others that you're working with, what's your first piece of information you want to share with them? What is it that you want them to know is most important to you in terms of trying to get your work done? Because we know that, and I don't want to ask you to answer this or to respond to this, but we know that the adversaries, as you've mentioned and everybody up here has mentioned, are getting so fast, from month to month. When you sit down and have conversations with how you can contribute to the product, what's the most important thing that you want to share with them?
Yeah, so in our conversations with government, we really talk about not just the capabilities around our technology, but the capabilities around other partners in the community. So as attacks continue to increase in speed, the human being can't respond to those. There has to be an automation aspect.
AI
is one. Machine learning, firewall rule sets, automatic port changes, ACLs, all those things have a part. At the same time, you don't want to disrupt business. So I think the key thing that we go into customers with is, first and foremost, CDM's a means to an end in a certain way, but agencies have to have, take advantage of the program to solve for their mission, much to Willie's point. The NASA mission is unique. There's different parts of NASA. The mission side, the corporate side, they have their own requirements, and they have to adapt, leveraging the tool sets that they're getting from the program and the people and the process that they're getting from the program to take full advantage of it. So I think that's the key things that we go in talking about.
So Dennis, we could talk all day about the threats and the possible fixes and solutions, but there's always going to be something that keeps a guy like you up at night, and I'm very interested in what that is when you consider that, again, the speed of the adversary, there's just the speed of life in general. There's always going to be something, and it may change from moment to moment. So I'm wondering, what's the number one thing, or two or three or four, if you look like you processed a lot of information. So what are the top things that keep you up?
Well, the adversaries are well-funded, highly motivated, and relentless. And perhaps as a little bit of context, the Secretary of the Navy just came out with a report, And in there, the Commandant of the Marine Corps is quoted as saying, and he mentioned this last month in February at FCA West, that we've been in a cyber war for a decade, in his opinion. And this report goes on to say explicitly that we're losing that cyber war to adversaries like Russia and China. Well, what does that have to do with civilian agencies? You know, the province of the cyber war is with DoD and the intelligence community, but one of the biggest targets is a civilian agency. NASA's got a treasure trove of engineering and scientific information that's worth, billions and billions of dollars to an adversary. The Department of Interior controls dams and floodways. Wouldn't an adversary want to threaten us there? Of course they would. So to me, the thing that keeps me awake is, are we moving at cyber relevant speed? And that's a hard thing to do because the adversaries certainly are. Yeah. So I think the Congress and DHS leadership needs to give Kevin Cox and the CDM program office the tools they need to respond to agency needs, recognize threats, work at cyber relevant speed so they can not only catch up, keep up, but get ahead of the threat.
Okay. We're going to come back to some more of this scintillating conversation. You guys are a great bunch. I appreciate this, the opportunity to get the ideas out there and to learn from them. You're listening to this panel discussion, Innovation in Government, Cyber Leaders in CDM, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.